Why so many tattoos, old man? Did you run out of paper or did you just lose a lot of bets in port? The insult didn't just land, it ricocheted through the gym like a bullet that hadn't yet found its target. Everyone paused mid-motion. The weights clanked like metallic punctuation marks in the tense silence that followed. The voice belonged to Petty Officer Dalton Briggs, a young Navy SEAL who carried arrogance as heavily as the duffel slung over his shoulder. He stepped with the kind of confidence only untested youth could muster, oblivious to the eyes beginning to turn his way. No one yet knew what they were witnessing. Those tattoos, mocked with such casual cruelty, were not mere decoration. They were maps of pain, memorials to lost brothers, coordinates inked permanently into flesh because paper could never carry memory without fading. And with a single careless taunt, Briggs had lit a fuse that had been dormant for decades. The gym hummed with the metallic echo of barbells, ropes swishing, and shoes squeaking across polished floors. Yet the entrance of Briggs, head held high and smirk firmly in place, carved a void of attention around him. Behind him, his teammates, louder, confident, and already amused, followed, a pack marking its territory. Near the pull-up bars sat the old man, a figure whose stillness was profound against the gym's motion. His hands were weathered, veins prominent under skin tanned and worn by years of sun and conflict. His arms bore tattoos that blanketed most bare skin, black ink etched in swirling patterns, coordinates, symbols, and reminders only he could read. His faded duffel bag lay at his side, the leather cracked and worn with a story in every crease. He did not lift a hand to defend himself. He did not flinch. He simply observed. Briggs tilted his head, inspecting him like a museum piece he'd stumbled upon. "Why so many tattoos, old man?" he asked loudly enough for half the gym to hear. His voice cut like a blade. "Trying to look dangerous before the nursing home recreation hour?" The laughter that followed from the younger men filled the gym, but it was hollow, sour, as if the room itself recoiled at the disrespect. The old man's gaze didn't waver. Calm, steady, unyielding. Something shifted. A subtle realignment of energy. The room was tilting toward something invisible yet inevitable. Briggs advanced, boots thudding against the rubber floors like war drums announcing conquest. "Seriously," he continued, circling the veteran with lazy arrogance, "what are these supposed to be? Souvenirs from bars you got kicked out of? Or did you just tell the tattoo artist, 'Surprise me,' every time you got bored?" Some of Briggs' teammates chuckled nervously. Others shifted uneasily, sensing an undercurrent they couldn't yet name. A civilian contractor by the water fountain froze mid-sip. But the old man didn't flinch. He rested his hands calmly on his knees, posture relaxed yet deeply centered, as if grounded in a force beyond the moment. "Bet none of these mean anything," Briggs sneered, leaning closer. "Bet you just inked your skin because you wanted to pretend you lived a life worth talking about." Finally the old man spoke. His voice was low and quiet but precisely measured. "You shouldn't make assumptions, son." Briggs barked a laugh, sharp and dismissive. "Oh, I'll assume anything I want. I earned that right." "Rights are proven, not claimed," came the reply, each word a quiet hammer striking the foundations of arrogance. The gym seemed to hold its breath. Marines paused mid-rep. Sailors stopped their routines mid-swing. Even the echoing clangs of metal seemed to fade. Briggs, blind to the shift, stepped closer into the man's space, pressing forward, pushing against something larger than his ego. "Listen, Grandpa," he said, leaning close, noses nearly touching. "I don't care what poetic nonsense you practiced in the mirror this morning. I asked why you have so many tattoos. Answer the question." The old man inhaled, slow and deliberate. "Every mark has a story," he said. "But you are not ready to understand the kind of stories that carry weight." Briggs flexed his jaw. "Try me." The veteran's gaze hardened, not angry but profoundly steady. "Some stories are earned through pain, loss, and sacrifice, not bravado." The room shifted further. A young Marine whispered, "Dude, why does this feel off?" Another sailor swallowed hard, the arrogance flowing from Briggs now faltering against the calm authority of the old man. Briggs jabbed a finger at one tattoo, a small faded raven perched on crossed blades. "This one. What's this supposed to be, huh?" The old man didn't touch it. His eyes flickered with memory, distant but sharp. "A reminder." "Of what?" "Of men I buried," he said quietly. Briggs paused, only for a heartbeat. Yet the silence was enough for the gym to feel the weight of the moment. "You think your sad boy war stories impress me?" Briggs spat, forced, his confidence cracking. The veteran's gaze, calm and icy, cut through the pretense. "If you want real answers, You must first learn to ask real questions. The gym collectively leaned in. Even the air seemed to bend toward the veteran. The sliding door hissed open. Conversation thinned. Commander Rachel Torres entered, presence immediate, authoritative, and precise. Her eyes swept the gym and then froze on the circle forming around Briggs and the veteran. Petty Officer Briggs. Her voice was steel, measured, and commanding attention. Why is half my gym staring at you like you're about to detonate something? Briggs straightened. Ma'am. Just addressing a disrespectful civilian loitering in the facility, he said, jerking a thumb toward the veteran without meeting his gaze. Torres' eyes narrowed. This is a restricted area. If he made it in here, he's not loitering. Who is he? Nobody, Briggs muttered. The word alone caused a ripple. Subtle winces, sharp breaths, and silent exchanges. Torres' gaze shifted to the veteran, curiosity replacing irritation. Sir, she said respectfully, do you have authorization to be here? The old man nodded once. I do. May I ask your name? He considered her carefully. Not yet. Torres' expression shifted from irritation to a recognition of gravity. Even she felt the weight of history pressing through the ordinary gym walls. Torres folded her arms, studying the veteran. Sir, if you feel additional action is necessary, this base will provide it. But, you appear to command respect simply by existing. The old man's lips curved in the barest hint of a shadowed smile. I need nothing except for your men to remember their oath. And their humility. Briggs' throat bobbed. Sir, I didn't know. His voice cracked like a man hearing the weight of truth for the first time. You didn't need to know, the veteran said. Respect should not require proof. The word struck harder than any reprimand. Around them, the crowd's collective breath caught. Even the clanking of weights in distant corners seemed to fade into reverent silence. Briggs' smirk was gone. His arrogance, his bravado, evaporated like smoke in wind. He looked smaller now, not just physically but in spirit. The veteran reached slowly for his duffel bag, unzipping it with care. A silence descended, a sacred quiet that wrapped the gym like a cloak. Inside lay a single folded uniform top, worn and battle-aged, fabric sun-bleached, insignias frayed but still distinguishable. Torres stepped closer, eyes widening, recognition dawning. Briggs squinted. What is that? Some antique. Torres' glare cut him down. That's not antique. That's an early special warfare designation. Units that don't exist anymore except in classified archives. The murmur swept the gym like a wave breaking over rocks. The veteran's presence stiffened subtly. Even a few junior sailors instinctively straightened, sensing they were in the presence of history. Briggs faltered. So, what? You're some old operator trying to flex on us. The veteran lifted his gaze, steady, anchored. No. I'm a man who buried too many friends to tolerate disrespect from children who haven't learned what sacrifice costs. Briggs' jaw worked. He wanted words but none would come. His eyes, once bright with cocky confidence, now held a flicker of fear. Torres stepped forward, voice soft and reverent. Sir, what was your designation? The old man exhaled slowly, the weight of decades held in one breath. It was never spoken in public, and it still shouldn't be. But Torres' face drained of color. Even a commander trained to maintain composure in crises could not hide the dawning realization. The man before them was a legend incarnate. A ghost who had walked through operations no one else could survive. Briggs whispered, uncertain. Who? Torres swallowed. Codename, Revenant. The operator who walked out of missions no one was supposed to survive. A man with confirmed rescues in 3 continents, infiltration routes still classified, and a survival record that reads like fiction. The veteran did not smile. I did not choose the name, he said softly. I simply buried those who wore it before me. The gym seemed to contract around the revelation. Briggs staggered back, his arrogance collapsing under the weight of truth. Every SEAL and Marine present, even the younger ones, felt it. They had been inches away from a living ghost, a man whose actions had defined the modern edge of American special operations. Torres bowed her head in respect, her voice barely a whisper. Sir, we studied you. Everything we could that wasn't redacted. You are the reason the modern teams exist as they do today. The veteran simply closed his duffel bag. I'm just a man, he said quietly. A man who tried to bring his brothers home. And in that moment, every single person in the gym realized they had been standing inches from history. The past, the weight of sacrifice, and the cost of war had walked among them. Briggs stood frozen. Color drained from his face. The swagger was gone, replaced by hollow shock. The man before him did not gloat. He did not demand an apology. He simply existed as a living measure of character, a standard far higher than anyone present had yet earned. Torres placed a hand gently on Briggs' shoulder. "Sir, if there is anything you need, anything at all." The veteran shook his head. "No. Let him learn. Scars teach better than punishments." The words weren't cruel, they were absolute truth. Briggs' shoulders slumped. He swallowed hard, voice quivering. "Sir, I didn't know." "You didn't need to," the veteran repeated, calm and unwavering. "Respect is not earned through knowledge of deeds. It is earned in every choice, every action. Humility precedes understanding." Around them the gym remained motionless. Each person absorbed the gravity, the shift in air, and the silent authority of someone who had carried entire missions on his shoulders. Briggs' hands twitched, unsure where to place them, unsure how to reconcile his arrogance with the living history before him. The veteran stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Not threatening, not punishing. Simply present, the embodiment of restraint and quiet power. "Son," he said gently, "tattoos don't make a warrior. Muscles don't make a warrior. Rank doesn't make a warrior." He paused, letting the weight of the words anchor themselves. "Character does." Briggs' eyes, wide and humbled, met the veteran's. "I understand that now, sir." The veteran's hand rested lightly on Briggs' shoulder, grounding him. "Good. Then carry that understanding further than I carried my scars." Briggs swallowed hard, voice tight. "I won't forget this." "Make sure you don't," the veteran said. "Men greater than me taught it with their lives." The gym remained silent, reverent. Even the distant sounds of machinery and weights seemed to retreat in the presence of someone whose silence spoke louder than any gunfire. The young sailors and Marines lowered their eyes, ashamed of the arrogance that had filled their midst moments ago. Torres stepped forward, her posture crisp but respectful. "Petty Officer Briggs," she said firmly, front and center. Briggs moved mechanically, jaw tight, unable to look at the veteran. Shame had wrapped itself around him like barbed wire. "Your conduct today represents a failure of discipline, respect, and situational awareness," Torres said. "Three qualities no SEAL can afford to lack." "Yes, ma'am," Briggs whispered. "But understand this," she continued, lowering her tone. "You did not disrespect a legend because he is a legend. You disrespected a man because you assumed he was beneath you." Briggs flinched. Each word a scalpel, cutting away his youthful conceit. "You will write a formal apology," Torres ordered. "You will complete additional mentorship training. And you will stand down from team operations for the next evaluation cycle." "Yes, ma'am," Briggs' voice cracked. Torres turned to the veteran. "Sir, if you feel additional action is necessary." He shook his head. "No. Let him learn. Scars teach better than punishments." Briggs' shoulders sagged. He had been given mercy far greater than he deserved, and he felt it in the marrow of his bones. The veteran rose slowly, joints creaking in a way only decades of service can explain. His presence felt larger than the sum of any man in the room. He did not hurry. His steps were quiet and deliberate. Every eye followed him, silently acknowledging the weight of experience in his movements. Sunlight streamed through the open doorway, illuminating the tattoos on his arms. They were not decorations, not souvenirs, not bravado. They were memorials, names, coordinates, echoes of battles fought in shadow so others never had to. He did not look back. He did not need to. The legend had passed through, and the room itself had changed shape. Humility, respect, and awe had taken residence in every heart present. And the veteran walked on, a quiet reminder of sacrifice, courage, and the true meaning of character. Briggs remained frozen in place, shoulder trembling under the veteran's hand. The weight of every decision he had made, every sarcastic word spoken, and every ounce of hubris he carried now pressed down on him like 1,000 invisible anchors. The gym seemed to expand around him, each sound magnified. The distant hum of air conditioning, the squeak of sneakers on rubber, and the faint metallic echo of a weight dropping half a floor away, all punctuating the absolute stillness of the moment. A young Marine at the squat rack whispered under his breath, barely audible, "Dude, that man, he's unreal." Another sailor, mid-rep, froze with the barbell suspended above his chest. Sweat dripped slowly from his brow, unnoticed as his eyes tracked the veteran. He realized instinctively, this man had walked through storms no training manual could prepare them for. Briggs' eyes darted nervously to Commander Torres, but her expression was unreadable. Calm, controlled, yet reverent. Every fiber of her body acknowledged what no one dared speak aloud. This was someone who had defined the very concept of survival, sacrifice, and warfare in ways they could barely imagine. Finally, Briggs' voice emerged, small, almost childlike. "Sir, I didn't think." "You never do," the veteran interrupted gently, voice low and heavy. "You never do until you stand face to face with what you cannot comprehend. And even then, comprehension is not the point. Respect is." Briggs swallowed hard. His throat felt tight, as though his voice had been locked in some invisible vice. He had mocked, assumed, and laughed at this man, and now, every unearned joke and every careless smirk pressed on him like a debt he could not repay. The veteran stepped back, removing his hand from Briggs' shoulder. Not with anger, but with quiet resolution. "Character," he said softly, "is what remains when the smoke clears, when the guns fall silent, when no one is watching. That is what makes a man." The gym absorbed the words, the silence stretching into an almost tangible presence. Even the youngest SEALs and Marines present, who had seen combat simulations and advanced training exercises, felt the gravity. Every muscle in their bodies relaxed involuntarily. Respect, earned not through rank or strength but by pure example, had claimed the room. Briggs finally sank to a nearby bench, his hands gripping the edge. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to justify, but he knew nothing he could say would be sufficient. The old man had already rendered judgment with his calm, unshakable presence. From the corner of the gym, a civilian contractor finally dared to step closer, curiosity overtaking caution. His voice was quiet but tinged with awe. "Sir, may I ask, how do you carry all that history, on your arms?" The veteran looked down at his inked forearms, sunlight catching the faded blue and black lines of memorials, coordinates, and names etched into skin. "Memory," he said simply. "Every mark is a story. Some are warnings, some are remembrances, and some are promises. And all of them are meant to be carried forward, never forgotten." A silence followed, not uncomfortable but reflective. Every person in the room felt the invisible weight of battles fought far from cameras, far from glory, and far from notice. And yet the consequences of those battles rippled outward, touching lives they would never know. Torres stepped closer to the veteran, tone soft, almost reverential. "Sir, the Raven program, the missions, you were the one who—" He raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "No, I'm not the story. The story belongs to the men who did not walk out, to the brothers who never returned, and to those who follow to learn what true sacrifice requires." Torres nodded slowly, understanding the enormity of the lesson before her. Even someone trained for decades to navigate chaos could not fully grasp the weight of decades of silent, unacknowledged heroism. Briggs, still on the bench, lifted his head. For the first time he truly saw the veteran, not as a relic, not as a target for mockery, but as a man who had carried unimaginable burdens and survived where few would have. The arrogance, the swagger, the youthful certainty, all gone. Replaced by awareness, humility, and awe. "Sir," Briggs said quietly, voice trembling, I hope one day I can understand, even a fraction of, what you've done." The veteran's gaze softened, not with pity but with acknowledgement. "Then start by understanding this," he said. "Strength without wisdom is vanity. Courage without humility is recklessness. And experience without compassion is worthless." A subtle nod passed between Torres and the veteran. Briggs felt the ground shift beneath him. He had witnessed history today, not in a textbook, not on a mission report, but in the presence of a man whose every scar, every story, and every inch of his being was a lesson in honor and sacrifice. The veteran began walking toward the gym exit. Each step deliberate, measured. He did not rush. He did not pause. Every eye followed him. Every heart recognized the weight of decades in his slow, steady stride. Sunlight caught the tattoos on his arms, highlighting the memorials, coordinates, and names. To the untrained eye they were decorations. But those who understood, the veterans, the young SEALs, and the Marines, recognized them as silent monuments to courage, friendship, and loss. Briggs stood slowly, finally feeling the full measure of his own inadequacy. He wanted to speak, to thank, to apologize, but he knew no words could carry the weight of what he had witnessed. He simply bowed his head, letting humility settle over him like a mantle he had never earned but would now strive to honor. Torres watched the veteran disappear through the doorway. "Sir," she whispered, "may your example guide us all." The veteran's voice drifted back over the threshold, calm and unwavering. "Remember this moment, and let it guide those who follow." The gym remained still for several long moments. Even the sounds of distant activity, the clanging of weights, and the faint murmur of conversation seemed hushed. Every person present felt the invisible hand of history brush against their consciousness. Briggs finally exhaled, a sound that carried relief, shame, and reverence all at once. He turned to his fellow SEALs, the Marines, and even the civilians present. I understand now, he said softly. I truly do. The veteran was gone, but his presence lingered like smoke in the air, a reminder that true strength, character, and sacrifice often walk in silence, leaving lessons behind not in words but in example. Torres straightened, voice steady but reflective. Let today be remembered. Not as an incident of disrespect, but as a lesson in humility, honor, and courage. And as the doors closed behind him, a quiet reverence remained, an invisible imprint on every soul in the gym. The veteran had passed through not as a legend to gawk at, not as a story to be repeated, but as a teacher whose classroom was the world and whose lessons were etched in skin, memory, and the very air around them. The gym slowly returned to life, but nothing would ever be the same. Young men and women carried with them the weight of witnessing history, the humility of standing in the shadow of a man who had faced death countless times, and the silent understanding that some lessons cannot be taught. They must be seen, felt, and internalized. Briggs' gaze lingered on the closed door. I will not forget this, he said under his breath. And somewhere just beyond reach, the veteran had already become a legend once again, not by rank, not by medals, not by noise, but by the quiet, immeasurable force of character. The gym had slowly returned to its routine. Weights clanged, sneakers squeaked, and voices murmured, but the energy had shifted. The young sailors and Marines moved through their drills with a new awareness, heads slightly lower, movements sharper, yet tempered with something more profound than discipline. Respect had been quietly instilled, heavier than any training regimen. Briggs lingered near the edge of the gym, unable to shake the weight of what had transpired. Every muscle he flexed, every breath he drew, reminded him that arrogance had no place here, not against history, not against a man who had truly seen the edge of mortality and walked back from it unbroken. He replayed the veteran's words in his mind, like a mantra he couldn't yet fully grasp. Strength without wisdom is vanity. Courage without humility is recklessness. Experience without compassion is worthless. He swallowed, remembering the way the veteran's hand had rested lightly on his shoulder, grounding him without judgment. It was a touch that carried decades of pain, camaraderie, sacrifice, and survival. He had been taught a lesson that could never be unlearned. Nearby, a young Marine whispered to his squad mate, I don't know who he was, but he wasn't just a man. He was something else. A ghost? The other suggested, half in awe, half in disbelief. More than a ghost, the first Marine replied. A force, history walking through us. Briggs closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. He had thought the gym confrontation would be a moment of dominance, a test of bravado, but it had become a mirror reflecting his own weaknesses. He had glimpsed the weight of true sacrifice and felt the sting of his ignorance. Commander Torres approached, her footsteps light but deliberate. She placed a hand on his shoulder, not as punishment but as guidance. Petty Officer Briggs, she said quietly, today you were shown what leadership looks like. It isn't in rank or skill alone. It is in humility. It is in understanding that you stand on the shoulders of men and women who have carried burdens you cannot yet imagine. Briggs nodded slowly, voice unsteady. Ma'am? I understand. I never realized. I will carry this lesson with me. Torres' eyes softened, but her tone remained firm. Good. Don't let this moment fade. Honor it by letting it shape every decision, every interaction. And remember, sometimes the strongest men are silent. Sometimes the loudest voices are empty. A subtle shift passed through the gym. Sailors and Marines who had witnessed the encounter stood a little straighter, their movements now carrying the echo of respect and caution. They had seen arrogance crumble in the presence of true character, and it was a lesson they would not forget. Briggs lingered a few more moments, staring at the gym doors the veteran had passed through. He felt a strange combination of awe, shame, and inspiration. In that silence, he could almost imagine the battles the veteran had survived, the missions that would never be documented, and the brothers who had fallen and whose names now marked his skin. The veteran's footsteps echoed faintly from the corridor beyond, fading slowly, but the impression he left remained indelible, permanent, etched not just in memory but in the hearts of those who had witnessed him. Later that evening, Briggs found himself alone in the barracks lounge, staring at his reflection in the glass. The arrogance of earlier had been replaced by a sober self-awareness. His uniform felt heavier now, not with insignia or medals, but with the responsibility of understanding what it meant to serve truly, humbly, and wisely. He thought of the tattoos, those memorials, coordinates, and stories etched into the veteran's arms. Each mark was a life remembered, a mission survived, a debt paid in blood and endurance. He realized then that real warriors were defined not by their victories alone, but by the lives they preserved and the sacrifices they silently bore. As he replayed the confrontation in his mind, he made a silent vow. He would carry forward the lesson of humility, respect, and vigilance. He would never again mock what he did not understand. He would strive to embody the character the veteran had exemplified, quietly and relentlessly. Across the base, whispers of the encounter spread like wildfire. Sailors and Marines recounted the moment in hushed tones. The way the veteran had moved, the calm authority in his voice, and the subtle way he had commanded respect without raising it with threats or loud declarations. Everyone agreed. He was more than a man. He was a living testament to everything that true service demanded. For the younger operators, it became a benchmark, a standard to aspire to. Not medals, not combat hours, not strength or agility, but resilience, integrity, and humility. Weeks passed. Briggs was assigned to new exercises, drills, and deployments. And though he worked tirelessly to improve his skills, his true growth came from introspection, reflection, and applying the lesson of the veteran to every decision and every interaction. He learned patience. He listened more. He questioned less. He served with a quieter confidence, a humility rooted in first-hand experience of reverence and awe. Commander Torres observed the transformation with a measured pride. The young SEAL who had entered the gym with arrogance now carried himself differently. His posture, his tone, and even his glances conveyed awareness, thoughtfulness, and respect. But it wasn't just Briggs who changed. The entire gym had been reshaped by that encounter. Conversations among sailors now included reflections on history, ethics, and honor. Younger Marines studied the concept of sacrifice beyond the battlefield. Even civilian contractors and support staff carried a quiet respect for the silent hero whose presence had been fleeting yet monumental. Meanwhile, the veteran, his purpose fulfilled, continued to move through life as he always had. Silent, observant, carrying the weight of memory and the light of compassion. He made no announcements and accepted no accolades. To him, the lesson had already been given. And in that act of restraint, he cemented his legend not through spectacle, but through the quiet, undeniable influence of a life lived with honor. Briggs would never see the veteran again. Yet every time he looked at the ocean, at the sunrise over the base, or at the camaraderie among his fellow operators, he felt the imprint of the encounter. The veteran's presence became a guiding shadow, shaping every choice, every action, every thought. Months later, during a deployment briefing, Briggs found himself referencing tactics, mission planning, and operational discipline with newfound clarity. He no longer sought to dominate or impress. Instead, he sought to protect, serve, and learn, carrying forward the invisible torch handed to him by the man who had taught him that true warriors are measured not by their victories, but by the integrity with which they fight, survive, and lead. And somewhere, out of reach, the veteran watched from afar. Not for recognition. Not for gratitude. But because he knew that the lessons he had lived would now ripple forward, shaping minds, hearts, and actions in ways the world would never fully comprehend. The gym, once a stage for arrogance, had become a cathedral of respect. The memory of the veteran lingered like sunlight through smoke, illuminating the path for generations yet to come. And Briggs, standing at the edge of that light, knew the weight of that moment would guide him for life. Because some lessons cannot be taught in words. Some truths cannot be written in manuals. They must be witnessed, felt, and carried forward in the silence of the heart. And in the quiet spaces between duty and legacy, the veteran's story, though untold in public records and hidden from most eyes, remained eternal, a testament to the power of honor, humility, and the indomitable human spirit. Follow for more cinematic veteran stories that hit just as hard.